I'm going to share the incredible stories of Betty J. Edie and Jessie Sawyer, two women who went through near-death experiences that profoundly changed their lives. These events, which happened under very different circumstances, left a lasting impact on how they see the world, their purpose, and their connection to something greater. Their stories are filled with moments of pain, wonder, and transformation. And I'll do my best to recount every detail as they shared it, painting a vivid picture of what they went through. First, let's talk about Betty J. Edie. Betty was 31 years old when she faced a moment that would redefine her entire existence. Now, at 78 years old, she looks back on that time with a sense of awe and gratitude. Betty had been struggling with health issues for months. She visited countless doctors and specialists, but no one could pinpoint what was wrong with her. After about 9 months of tests and minor procedures, the medical team decided that a hysterectomy might help them understand what was happening inside her body. The surgery was performed, and initially, everything seemed fine. They conducted biopsies of her uterus and ovaries, and the results came back clear. After spending 2 nights in the hospital, Betty was sent home to recover. However, just 6 to 8 hours after being discharged, Betty felt an unbearable pain in her stomach. She described it as if someone had taken her insides out, blended them, poured gasoline on them, set them on fire, and then forced them back into her body. It was excruciating. Her husband, seeing her in such distress, rushed her to the emergency room. Once there, the medical staff admitted her immediately. Betty's blood pressure was dangerously low. Her heart rate was at 145 beats per minute, and she had a mild fever. Scans revealed that she was bleeding internally, but her blood levels were so low that they couldn't risk another surgery right away. Instead, they started her on antibiotics and gave her blood transfusions to stabilize her condition. In the early hours of the morning, between 2 and 4 a.m., Betty was in and out of consciousness. The pain was relentless, and even sleep couldn't offer her any escape. As she lay there, staring at the wall, something extraordinary happened. Betty felt as though her eyes opened, and then opened again. But this time, she found herself in a vast, misty, white room. It was an endless space, unlike anything she had ever seen. The first thing she noticed was that she could stand up straight, something she hadn't been able to do since her surgery. She felt no pain at all. In fact, Betty felt like the best version of herself, perfect, whole, and at peace. This sensation overwhelmed her with a sense of astonishment. As she stood in this strange, ethereal place, Betty noticed a figure in the distance. Even before she could see them clearly, she instinctively knew who it was. It was Anthony, one of her dearest friends who had passed away 2 years earlier. Her heart filled with joy at the sight of him. She wanted to run to him, embrace him, and tell him how much everyone missed him. But as she approached, Betty realized this wasn't just a happy reunion. Something deeper, something serious was happening. Then, behind Anthony and to her right, a light began to appear. It started as a faint shimmer, growing brighter and more intense with each passing moment. That's when it hit her. This was death. This was her death. And Anthony was there to guide her home. The light was indescribable. Betty felt it was the embodiment of the most profound, unconditional love she had ever known. It was everything that ever was and ever would be. In that moment, she felt connected to the entire universe. She was presented with a choice, and during this time, she experienced what she called a life review. In this review, Betty saw the impact her life had on the world around her. It wasn't judgmental. It was simply a reflection of the energy she had put out into the world during her time on Earth. The light seemed to communicate with her, saying it loved her and was a part of her. Meanwhile, Betty also saw how her death would affect her loved ones. She was shown her 2 children, who were only 5 and 2 years old at the time. She witnessed the grief they would feel if she didn't return, but she also saw that they would be okay in the long run. Their lives would thrive even without her. She also felt her husband's grief, and it was so intense that it felt like her own. She saw him sleeping on a fold-out couch in the hospital room and wanted to float down to him to tell him everything would be all right. Anthony, standing beside her, gave her shoulder a loving squeeze and smiled as if she had answered an unspoken question. Then, the light and Anthony began to move away, and Betty felt herself falling back into her body. Returning to her physical form was painful for Betty. She likened it to jumping into an ice-cold pool after being in a warm sauna. It was a jarring contrast to the peace she had felt in that other realm. But something miraculous happened after she came back. Betty started expelling all the blood that had been pooling in her abdominal cavity. She released over 2 liters of blood and 800 cubic centimeters of large clots. It was a terrifying sight for the nursing staff and her family, but strangely, her vital signs began to improve. She was stabilizing, not getting worse. To this day, the doctors don't fully understand what caused her initial illness, where the internal bleeding came from, or how she recovered so suddenly. Now, let's turn to Jessie Sawyer's story, another woman who faced a near-death experience that left her forever changed. Jessie never believed in such things before it happened to her. 10 years ago, if someone had told her she would go through something like this, she would have laughed it off. She didn't even believe in God at that point in her life. But everything changed after a routine hysterectomy went terribly wrong. Jessie woke up in her private hospital room around 9 or 9:30 p.m. after the surgery. At first, she felt no pain, just an eerie sensation as if every drop of blood had drained from her body. She tried to reach for the nurse's call button by her bed, but she was too weak to even move. Then, a numbing feeling started creeping up from her feet, and suddenly, she felt a movement in her chest followed by a distinct popping sound. In that instant, Jessie's spirit seemed to leave her body at an incredible speed. She found herself looking down at her physical form lying on the hospital bed below her. Jessie knew right then that she had died. The realization hit her hard. "Oh my God, I'm dead," she thought. She didn't know how it had happened, but there was no denying it. Suddenly, 3 ancient-looking men appeared beside her bed. They weren't just old, they seemed beyond age itself. They explained to her that she had died prematurely. Jessie's first instinct was to see her family, so she floated out of the hospital window and traveled to her home. There, she saw her husband sitting in a chair, reading a newspaper. She stood by him, feeling a deep concern that he didn't know she had passed. She also worried about her children and how they would cope without her. As she thought about them, she could see each child and the phases of their lives. To her relief, she saw that they would be okay, even if she wasn't there. This brought her a sense of peace, as any mother would feel knowing her children would thrive. After this, Jessie returned to the hospital and was drawn into a massive tunnel. Inside there were sounds, music and chimes that were incredibly soothing. She felt comfortable as she moved through the tunnel into a vast, dark space. At the far end, she saw a form illuminated by a brilliant light. As she got closer, she realized it was Jesus Christ, standing with his arms outstretched. Jessie reached for him, and they embraced. He held her close and spoke to her, saying, "It's not yet your time." 3 women, whom she believed were angels or guardians, appeared beside them. Jesus instructed them to show Jessie everything she needed to know. They took her to a garden, a place of unimaginable beauty. Jessie walked through it, marveling at the colors and flowers, some of which don't even exist on Earth. The beauty was beyond description. While there, she was told she wouldn't remember much of what was happening, but she felt a deep sense of peace. Later, men she called warring angels approached her in the garden and asked if she was ready for more. She agreed, and they lifted her into the air. It felt like a freedom of flight as they traveled from planet to planet. Eventually, Jesus told her it was time to return to Earth. Jessie didn't want to leave. The love and total acceptance she felt in that place were unlike anything she had ever known. But she had no choice. Before returning, Jessie saw a beautiful man she recognized as God the Father. She ran to him, falling at his feet with her head on his lap. He told her she had a mission to fulfill and showed her what it entailed. Then, he said she must go back. The next thing she knew, Jessie was traveling quickly back to her body. Re-entering it felt dark and heavy compared to the lightness of her spirit. She didn't want to return, but she was compelled to. Both Betty and Jessie faced a choice during their near-death experiences, whether to stay in that beautiful, unearthly realm or return to their earthly lives. When they ultimately came back, they carried with them a new perspective on life and death. For Betty, the experience was physically shocking as her body expelled the blood and clots, yet her condition improved against all odds. For Jessie, returning to her body felt like a burden after the freedom of the spirit world, but she embraced her mission. After their experiences, both women spoke to their doctors about what happened. Betty cautiously mentioned seeing a light while in the hospital, and her surgeon admitted he had heard of such things, but never had a patient share it with him. He told her she had been walking the line for a while. Jessie, 5 years after her experience, asked her doctor if he knew she had died. He confirmed he was aware of it. These conversations validated what they had gone through, even if the medical world couldn't fully explain it. Near-death experiences like those of Betty and Jessie often share common elements, despite each being unique. Researchers note that many involve a life-threatening event, an out-of-body experience where consciousness separates from the body, and often a journey through a tunnel toward a brilliant light. Some, like Jessie, encounter deceased loved ones or spiritual figures in a beautiful realm that feels like home. Overwhelming positive emotions are common, as is a life review or a choice to return to Earth. The impact of these experiences on Betty and Jessie was transformative. Neither woman fears death anymore. They believe they've seen what lies beyond and know it's wonderful. Their values shifted as well. They became less materialistic and more loving. Betty started volunteering at a cancer research center in Seattle, working with dying patients and their families. She also began speaking at church organizations to share her story. Jessie felt an intense love for everyone she met after her experience, a stark contrast to how she felt before. She no longer fears dying and says she would be perfectly okay with passing away at any moment. These stories challenge what we know about life and death. Medical science struggles to explain how someone like Betty could stabilize after expelling so much blood, or how Jessie could have such vivid experiences while under the effects of anesthesia or during cardiac arrest, when brain activity should be flat. Yet hundreds of people report similar near-death experiences, including those blind from birth who describe highly visual encounters. Betty and Jessie's journeys remind us of the mysteries that surround life and death. Their experiences, filled with light, love, and a sense of purpose, have left them with a profound understanding of what it means to live. They've seen beyond the veil, and though they return to their earthly lives, they carry with them a piece of that other world, a world they believe is their true home. Their stories inspire a sense of wonder and hope, encouraging us to consider what might await us all on the other side.